All right, get ready to dive deep as we tackle some mental health myths today. We're taking a look at a chapter from Mental Health, Unveiling Myths and Embracing Truths. And this book, oh boy, it's packed with surprises. Get ready to bust some myths and, maybe even have a chuckle or two along the way.
It really is interesting how these myths, even the ones that seem kind of funny at first, they often have a little grain of truth hidden in there somewhere. Take the placebo effect, for instance. The book describes it, get this, as a mind hack. Like, it's suggesting that what we believe can actually really affect how well we are.
Okay, that is both fascinating and a little bit like, whoa, hold on. So are you saying that if I convince myself that my lucky rabbit's foot is going to banish all the bad vibes, my brain might actually go along with it and I'll feel less stressed? Yeah.
Maybe not exactly rabbit's foot territory, but yeah, you're getting the idea. The placebo effect is a really cool example of just how powerful our brains are when it comes to responding to what we expect. Even if those expectations, well, even if they're not exactly uh, based on solid evidence, our brains can still make things happen physically. It's almost like our mind is saying, okay, you think it's real, so let's
Ah,
make it real.
whoa, that's crazy. So it's like we're all just walking around creating our own little placebo effects all the time. That's both kind of awesome and a little bit freaky.
It definitely makes you think, doesn't it? It really highlights how much power our thoughts have and just how important it is to, try to keep things positive up there. And speaking of mindset, the book also tackles this idea that mindfulness is, just some fleeting trend.
Right. The book uses some really clever comparisons to get this point across. It talks about how ancient warriors would use mindfulness techniques to, stay focused and centered right before a battle. And then it connects that to how gamers today will use strategies to help them concentrate.
Those are some really great examples. They show us that mindfulness isn't just some new fad. It's a practice that has been around for centuries with really deep roots and all kinds of different ways it can be used. It's all about, being aware of what's happening around us and choosing what to focus on. That's a skill that comes in handy pretty much everywhere.
So it's more than just sitting there with your eyes closed trying to make your mind go completely blank, which, let's be honest, sounds kind of impossible.
Exactly. And the book actually debunks this idea that meditation is some kind of quick fix for everything. It makes it clear that mindfulness is a journey. It takes time and patience to really develop. It's kind of like building a muscle. The more you practice focusing and controlling your emotions, the stronger you get at it.
So it's like leveling up in a video game. You start with the simple stuff, like breathing exercises, and gradually work your way up to more challenging mental tasks. I'm already feeling calmer just thinking about it.
That's the spirit. The book suggests starting small, like just dedicate 5 minutes each day to focus on your breath. And then from there, you can start to bring that sense of calmness into other parts of your daily life.
I love that idea. Little bursts of mindfulness throughout the day. I'm in. And speaking of things that sound good, the book also addresses this idea that medication is the only solution for mental health struggles. They use this really interesting analogy, like thinking a potion is the only way to win a game.
Exactly right. While medication can be a really important tool for some people, it's important to remember that it's not the be-all and end-all solution. The book stresses that making changes to your lifestyle can be incredibly powerful for improving well-being. Things like exercise, how you eat, getting enough sleep, these all play a huge role in mental health.
So it's about having a well-rounded approach, right? Like a balanced breakfast, but for your brain.
I like that. And, speaking of things that are good for you, the book also delves into social support and the impact it has on our mental well-being. It compares finding your people to joining a guild in an online game, which I think is a really cool way to look at it.
It totally is. We talked about how important those connections are, for our mental health, but I'm curious about the how-to part. Do you have any practical tips from the book on actually finding and nurturing those connections?
Absolutely. The book really encourages us to, be proactive, to step outside our comfort zones and explore different ways to connect with others. That could mean joining a club or a group that focuses on something you're passionate about. It could mean volunteering for a cause you care about, or even just, striking up conversations with people you meet in your everyday life.
I think a lot of people struggle with that, especially these days, with everything being so digital. It's easy to feel isolated, even though we're constantly connected online.
That's a really good point. And the book acknowledges that challenge. It suggests finding a balance, between online and offline interactions. Online communities can be awesome for finding support and connecting with people who get you, but it's also really important to make sure you're having those face-to-face interactions whenever you can.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where technology is helping us connect instead of replacing those connections.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've talked about the mind-body connection and the power of social support. What other myths does this book tackle?
Well, one that really stood out to me was this idea that medication is the only answer when it comes to mental health challenges. Remember that analogy about the potion being the only way to win a game?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
like you can just down a magic elixir and all your problems will vanish.
Yeah.
In reality, it's way more complicated than that, right?
Oh, exactly. And while medication can be a really important part of treatment for some people, it's super important to remember that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. The book really emphasizes a more holistic approach to mental health, where you look at lifestyle changes, social support, self-care practices, and then medication if it's needed. It's about addressing things from all angles.
So it's about taking an active role in your own well-being and exploring all the different options that are out there.
Yeah.
It's empowering to know that we actually have more control than we sometimes think we do.
Absolutely. And speaking of empowering, I think we should swing back to the placebo effect for a minute because it really makes you question what our minds are capable of.
Yeah. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact that just believing in something can actually cause real changes in our bodies and minds. It's
Hmm.
like our brains have this secret superpower that we're just starting to figure out.
It's a pretty fascinating phenomenon, and the book does a great job of breaking down the science behind it. Basically, when we expect something to have a certain effect, our brains release these chemicals that can actually produce those effects, even if the thing we're doing isn't actually doing anything.
So it's not about tricking ourselves, it's about using the power of expectation to make positive changes.
Exactly. And while there's still debate around the ethics of using the placebo effect, there's no doubt that it has the potential to make a real difference in how we approach well-being.
This deep dive is seriously making me rethink everything I thought I knew about mental health. It's like a mental spring cleaning, where we get rid of old beliefs and make space for new, more empowering ones.
I love that. That's exactly what it's all about, embracing the truths that can help us thrive and letting go of the myths that hold us back. And guess what? We're not done yet. And we're back, diving deeper into those mental health myths. Before we move on, though, I want to touch on the mind-body connection again for a sec. It's so easy to get caught up in everyday life that we kind of forget our physical and mental well-being. They're like totally linked.
It's true. It's almost like we try to separate them in our minds when really they're constantly affecting each other. The book really drove home the point that even small changes in our physical habits can have a huge impact on how we feel mentally.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't have to be, running marathons or becoming a yoga master overnight. It's more about finding ways to bring mindful movement into your life, in a way that feels good for you.
The book talked about yoga and Tai Chi, but it also mentioned things like just taking a walk in nature or dancing to your favorite music.
Right, exactly. The key is to find something that you enjoy and that leaves you feeling energized, both physically and mentally. And, you know, speaking of feeling energized, let's loop back to social support for a minute.
Yes. The book compared finding your tribe to joining a guild in an online game, which I thought was such a great visual. We talked about how important those connections are for our mental health, but I'm curious, are there any practical tips in the book for actually finding and nurturing those connections?
That's a great question. The book really encourages us to be proactive about it, to step out of our comfort zones a bit and explore different ways to connect with people, like maybe joining a club or group that focuses on something you're interested in, or volunteering for a cause you're passionate about, or even just starting conversations with people you come across in your daily life.
I think that's something a lot of people struggle with, especially now when so much of life is online. It's kind of ironic, right? You can be super connected online, but still feel isolated.
Yeah, for sure. And the book talks about that challenge. It suggests trying to find a balance between those online interactions and offline ones. Online communities can be amazing for finding support and connecting with like-minded people, but it's important to make time for face-to-face interactions too, whenever possible.
It's like finding that sweet spot where technology actually helps us connect rather than replacing those real-life connections.
That's it.
So we've talked about the mind-body connection, the power of social support. What other myths did the book debunk?
Well, one that really stuck with me was the myth that medication is the only solution for mental health challenges. You remember that analogy they used about thinking a potion is the only way to win a game?
Oh, yeah. Like you can just drink some magic potion and poof, all your problems
Yeah.
disappear. But it's just not that simple, is it?
Nope. And while medication can be an important part of treatment for some people, it's really important to remember that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. The book really pushes for a more holistic approach to mental health. One that looks at lifestyle changes, social support, self-care, and then medication if it's needed. It's about looking at the whole picture.
So it's about being proactive and taking control of your well-being, right?
Right.
Trying different things and figuring out what works best for you. It's pretty empowering to realize we have more agency than we sometimes give ourselves credit for.
I agree. And speaking of empowering, I think we should circle back to the placebo effect for a moment. It really challenges our assumptions about what our minds are capable of.
Yeah. It still blows my mind that just believing in something can actually create real changes in our bodies and minds. Like, it's almost as if our brains have this hidden superpower that we're only just beginning to understand.
It really is fascinating, and the book does a great job explaining the science behind it. Basically, when we expect something to have a certain effect, our brains release these neurochemicals that can actually create those effects, even if the thing itself isn't actually doing anything.
So it's not about tricking ourselves, it's about harnessing the power of expectation to make positive changes.
Precisely. And while the ethical implications are still being debated, there's no doubt that the placebo effect has the potential to completely change how we think about well-being and personal growth.
This deep dive has seriously been an eye-opener. We've debunked so many myths and uncovered some truly empowering truths about mental health. It feels like we've been given this whole new toolkit for taking care of our minds.
One of the biggest takeaways for me is that mental health isn't some destination you arrive at, it's a journey. It's about constant growth and self-discovery and finding what works best for you. It's about embracing the ups and downs, knowing that challenges will come up, and having the tools and support to navigate them with resilience and, a sense of grace.
Well said. And speaking of journeys, it feels like we've reached the end of ours for today.
It's been a pleasure sharing these insights with you.
And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this myth-busting adventure. We hope you've learned some valuable insights and maybe even had a few laughs along the way. Remember, mental health is a journey, and there's always more to discover.
Stay curious and keep an open mind.
Until next time. Welcome back for the final part of our deep dive into mental health myths. We've been on quite a journey so far.
It really has been fascinating, unpacking all these common misconceptions and uncovering the truths they often reveal. It's been a real eye-opener.
Before the break, we were talking about the power of the placebo effect. How simply believing in something can actually, improve our well-being. It still kind of blows my mind that something as basic as an expectation can have a real measurable effect.
Yeah, it really speaks to just how amazing our brains are, how adaptable they are, and how much they respond to our thoughts and beliefs. It's like we all have this potential to shape our own experiences. So if we can harness that power of positive thinking, is it possible that we could use the placebo effect to our advantage in other parts of life? Like, could we use it to boost our confidence or even our creativity?
That's a question researchers are really starting to explore more. And
Yeah.
what they're finding is pretty exciting. It suggests that the placebo effect isn't just limited to our physical health. It can also have an impact on our minds and emotions.
Wow, that's huge. It's like we have this untapped superpower just waiting to be unleashed.
Exactly. And while we still have a lot to learn about how it all works, and of course the ethical considerations are important too, there's no denying that the placebo effect has the potential to, totally revolutionize how we approach well-being and personal growth.
I gotta say, this whole deep dive has been a game changer for me. We've debunked so many myths and uncovered some truly powerful truths about mental health. It's like we've been given this whole new toolbox for taking care of our minds. I think one of the most important things to remember is that mental health isn't some finish line you cross. It's more like an ongoing journey. It's about continuously learning and growing, and figuring out what works best for you as an individual. It's about accepting the ups and downs that come with life, knowing that challenges are a part of it, and having the tools and the support you need to face those challenges with resilience and grace.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It sounds like we've reached the end of our journey for today.
It's been a real pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this myth-busting adventure. We hope you walk away with some valuable insights and, hey, maybe even a few laughs along the way. Remember, mental health is a journey, not a destination, and there's always more to explore and discover.
Stay curious. Keep an open mind.
And until next time, happy diving.